Welcome to the Dandelion Effect podcast, a space for organic conversation about the magic of living a connected life. Just like the natural world around us, we are all linked through an intricate web, a never-ending ripple that spans across the globe. Here, we explore the ideas that our guests carry through the world, remember who and what inspired them along the way, and uncover the seeds that help them blossom into their unique version of this human experience. This podcast is a production of the Feathered Pipe Foundation, whose mission is to help people find their direction through access to programs and experiences that support healing, education, community, and empowerment. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dandelion Effect podcast. I'm your host, Andy Van Treese, and if this is your first time listening, a special welcome to all the newcomers, and if you've been with us for a while, hello again and welcome back. Today, I am talking with Jessica Bugbee, and Jess is a U.S. Army combat veteran, wellness director at Hudson Valley National Center for Veteran Reintegration, and co-founder of Tribe, a nonprofit that teaches yoga and meditation to the active duty military community. She's also a peer specialist in the Vet-to-Vet program of Ulster County, New York, and leads women's warrior writing classes, mindful hiking groups, kayaking trips, and other mind-body-spirit offerings to support and empower veterans and their families. Jess served as a combat medic and paratrooper during her 7 years of active duty and has been on a monumental healing journey since returning to the States, navigating life after the military and finding her way through post-traumatic stress disorder and the myriad ways that trauma presents in the mind and body. In today's conversation, we talk about her life of service, where it started and who inspired it, her experience in the Army, oftentimes as one of 2 to 3 women among 500 or more men, and what her reintegration process has looked like, the ways that her military experiences, while technically over, are not at all over, and which modalities and healing techniques have helped her overcome and move through anger, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and heartbreaking loneliness over the last 7 years since her discharge. Now, she practices and teaches 5 categories of wellness and rehab: nature, community, movement, breath, and storytelling or story sharing. It's these resources that inspired her to start Tribe in 2019, along with a team of veterans, military spouse and family members, and yoga teachers who are dedicated to showing people that their superpowers and navigational tools are actually within them and accessible at any moment. Jess is transparent and real about her journey of self-care, healing, and what it means to be a warrior then and now. And I just want to invite you, if after listening to this episode you realize it may resonate and help someone you love, please share it with them. No one needs to suffer in silence and feel like they're alone. And the more that we can have these conversations up front and out loud, I think the better off we're going to be in spreading this work and spreading this awareness of mental health for veterans and really anyone going through trauma and trying to alchemize that. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation and help me welcome my friend, Jessica Bugbee. You are somebody that has lived this life of service, both serving in the Army and now like everything you're doing to serve your fellow members, teaching yoga, space holding, writing workshops, and a bunch of other things. And I know that when we talked last, you said that as a young person, you just had this sense of wanting to serve your country. So I'm curious of wanting to start there and just asking you like where that sense of service came from.
My parents, when I was a little girl, we lived in Massachusetts. That's where they're from and where I was born. But they lived in a home for mentally challenged children, young adults. And we lived there and they managed it. They were in that field of psychology. And actually now my dad, at the age of 68, he completed his master fitness trainer. And he's still working right now, but he wants to help physically challenged, whether they're mentally handicapped or physically challenged in some way, with rehab. As a matter of fact, right now he's volunteering his time with the Special Olympics basketball team in Albany. if I break it down to what is service, at its roots, it is caregiving to a degree, right? It's giving of yourself to others. And my mom's always been in that as well, whether it was like Catholic Church, and she really does a fantastic job at that. So I think, by osmosis, I've never actually thought of that until this very moment. And in fact, I remember growing up and planning out my life and kind of thinking that at some point my spouse would die, and then I would go and I would become a nun, and I would just give my life to service, like Mother Teresa, and all would be well. My parents, they weren't in the military. My grandfathers were, but I think it was how my grandfathers presented themselves and just the look that they had in their eyes. It was as though I had this connection with them, like it was from a different time. My soul was attracted to how they kind of moved, and I wanted to understand. And I didn't get a whole lot of their war stories, so to speak, but they lived this life, in solitude, and it seemed of peace. Not to say that they didn't carry demons, because they most definitely did. There were bits and pieces of their service, like little pendants or cards that said USS, the ship that they were on, and a ticket for the period of leave, that they saved. Just little things here and there. And I'd ask them about it. Even some of my uncles were in the military, and just their sense of adventure and being outdoors, learning and using your hands.
I know a big transition in your childhood, as you've told me, is when you moved from Charlotte, which is where you lived after Massachusetts, then to a smaller town outside of the city of Charlotte called Mount Holly. That's where a lot of kind of pivotal things happened as far as you stepping more into that leadership role and into that service role.
I was just a natural leader, I was always kind of in charge of the neighborhood, the one that was wearing the dresses, but also playing cops and robbers, taking charge of everybody and all the boys. And I was just so bossy, is what my mom says, and you can ask anybody at work, and they're like, yep, she is. She's very militant. And it's the truth, unfortunately. I'm still working on that. And the county didn't have girls soccer. So my parents, went and requested that I could try out for the boys soccer team. And when it came down to the day for me to try out, I said, I don't want to, and my parents were livid. They said, you're going to try out for it.
we just made this happen.
Exactly. And I was like, no, I'm not. And oh my gosh, it was so horrible. I was holding onto the bedpost, and, they're like, you're going. Anyhow, I ended up missing the JV practice. So I had to try out for the, varsity team, and which was even worse, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. Right. And then the cute guys and everything.
Yes.
So anyhow, I did it. I was on the guys team, and then the following year we ended up having a girls soccer team for the whole county. So that was really cool. So I'm not looking to go out and do these things. It's just these opportunities either haven't been there or they have been there, and it's been at the right place at the right time kind of thing, I guess. Because by no means am I Mia Hamm, clearly, I'm not Brittany Chastain, whatever. I'm not those people, in any particular subject. But it just seems if you look at my resume, I do have accolades in a lot of things. I just have this persistence and drive to say, hey, we ought to all be able to do this. We ought to all be able to have this experience. When I was in high school, there wasn't a whole lot of service clubs. There were Youth Christian Club or something, but then there was this club called the Interact Club. And my English teacher was the, advisor for it. And I showed up to it, and I really liked it and saw that there was opportunity for it. And she kind of gave me this lead to this youth program. And I went and checked it out. And I ended up going. I was like the only person that ever went. And I ended up building the club and becoming the president. And it was a youth safe house for runaways. And so we developed a program where we, as high schoolers, we would go and hang out and help them with their homework and cook dinner with them and eat dinner with them. And, we just did different things with them like that throughout the week. And it just became super rewarding, to like a mentorship program, a peer mentorship program. And ironically, that's, what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
In my
there's
life.
Like a very direct link.
Yeah. I don't know. I just felt so dang good about myself, like with my mom and dad, there was lots of dysfunction between the two of them. I think they were meant to come together and create the two of us. And then that was kind of the end of, their life together. So my parents divorced when I was 10 years old, and it wasn't pleasant. I really felt like I was a grown-up in the house. I found meditation and like breath work when I was very young, sitting underneath our dogwood tree at the house. And I was out there breathing and meditating, and I was finding myself and grounding myself in nature. Didn't understand what I was doing at the time.
And didn't have the language for it, I'm sure.
No, absolutely
just
not.
Like those instinctual things that our nervous systems do, those ways that we self-soothe, just to get through.
Right. That self-regulation. Yeah. But we didn't talk about really what was happening. I occupied my time with doing things like 2 different soccer teams, and then being on the cross country team, and being in the Interact Club and the Spanish Club. And, then sometimes going and hanging out with like the group that was kind of the bad group, and maybe smoking some pot, and, and being a loner and driving my car through the backcountry road. I avoided, like the traumas in my life. Service was what I went to. And that's what gave me confidence. That's what gave me just a sense of pride. That's what gave me love, and unfortunately I went to the external, I didn't go within. I wasn't taught, really how to fill my cup up, but it did that for me, and it was healthy.
I was going to say, like, whether it was the way that you were coping, or it was a little bit of, I'm going to help these other people and kind of take myself into this world because my world and my home life is tough. I think those are all still, as an adolescent, intelligent ways to reroute trauma. You're not taught otherwise, which many of us aren't. I mean, very few number of us are in childhood. I think a lot of this healing comes after you've experienced it and know that you want to do it another way. I just want to kind of say kudos to the young you, because turning to service and helping others feel better as a way to help you feel better is just like a lot of gratitude for young Jessica there.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. I have awareness now. I'm living a conscious life, and it's not easy, right?
Oh my God. I mean, once you start looking inward, you can't unsee things. And it's like you've learned how to be present, which is challenging. Like, it's really, really challenging in a lot of ways when you make that decision to explore yourself and your inner world rather than, escape it. The ways that you grew up, it's not surprising to me that you found yourself, in the Army. It's like this larger scale of service. And so I want to ask you about your experience for those 7 years.
Well, you caught me at a very great time, to be honest with you, because I am ready to share all of it. I'm ready to share the beautiful and the ugly, the clean and the dirty. My military experience is not over, Andy. It's not. In fact, I wrote something on Wednesday. I wrote, yes. Is it over? I believe it is over. On the outside, that is. But even still, that seems untrue or not right in my body. I carry it around with me, even still. After 7 years discharged, not much has discharged. Released anger, released tears, released sweat, released blood, broken bones. I even released a monster for a period of time. That monster came after. I know she is still within. I can call her forth at any time. In any branch of service, you're always an infantryman first, but I was trained as a combat medic. I also was a parachutist. Being a combat medic, so I was always in a field unit, which meant that I provided no further than a level 2 care, which is essentially anything from like field medicine, frontline care, providing tourniquet care, gunshot wounds, sucking chest wounds, regular like medevac type of things. Anybody that has, colds, any type of like complaints. So I left the Army as a staff sergeant. So I had various jobs, teaching combat lifesaver skills. And then, of course, I taught medic, continuing education, nutrition, health, field sanitation classes. So I was on the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, and I went to Iraq for 15 months, and I was in Sadr City, Baghdad. And then I was with the 10th Mountain Division, and I deployed with them to Afghanistan, northwest part of Afghanistan, going between 3 small composts with a field artillery unit, one of 3 women with 500 men. And I was there for 365 days. I had to work my butt off, to like just be like as good as, right, or get noticed. And when I went into Iraq, I was part of a FFT, which is a field treatment team. They were bringing us in there because having females a part of your unit, what does it do? It enables you to be able to search women, because in the Muslim community, men can't touch women, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we were there. We weren't there initially because we had so much skill. Why did my commander choose the 2 of us? Yes, because we were ones that would not cause like a ruckus, and we were good at our jobs.
I never would have thought about that's why they had to have some women on the team in general.
Mm-hmm. So we stayed in the little tiny aid station with the other medics, but then yet Sergeant Scott and I could not stay and sleep in that aid station with the guys because we were women. So we had to go sleep inside the TALK, which was the command station, right? Which was actually like a better kind of living situation, so to speak. So you would think we'd be happy, but we were upset because those were like our guys. So now we're having to like walk, and we were actually getting mortared like at this place too. So it was like, why are we having to sleep way far away from the aid station? So there were things that were done that just didn't make sense because of, our gender. So, for the most part, I mean, I would say I felt I was treated okay. It's always interesting because at first you're just being sized up mostly.
Yeah. Kind of have to prove yourself way more than others.
Mm-hmm. Just irony. But my very first mission out of the gate, there was a mass casualty. Someone handed me a baby, and the parent was also standing right there screaming. I just remember having that out-of-body experience, and then I just took that deep breath and told myself, okay. And that's where everything just kind of clicked into place. And from that point on until for about 10, 12 years, I just worked pretty flawlessly. And I knew very well how to do that. I believe that I could operate in such a way that no one could see that I was living in that space of fight or flight. I had such a facade. I think that's why it made me so good around the men, because I had a poker face. And I was very laser focused. I saw death. I saw, life, and I saw death like in a moment, and so it really did something to me. And sometimes I didn't understand how some people could not get their act together or not have certain things, if they weren't on point and they didn't know their stuff. I couldn't understand it. And I was a hard ass to people at times. I could be quite judgmental about certain things. When I was, a sergeant and leading soldiers, my nickname was the Standard. And I didn't know that for quite some time. And someone had like let the cat out of the bag, I guess. And I was like, okay, the Standard. But really it was like not funny, it was like, wow, that's got to be a lot of pressure for someone to be. And I did that to even my like romantic partners, and talking about living consciously. And like, when you start to sit back and you look at like the pressure you put on other people, the expectations you put on other people, especially when we're all like struggling in this place, this like war zone. I try not to live my life in regret. And, I do wish that I could go back and be a kinder, gentler, spiritual being during that time. But I suppose maybe somebody would have died. Maybe I would have died,
Right. That's such a complex thing, because as I hear you speaking, there's language of such a self-responsibility for how you acted and the decisions that you made as a leader. And of course, everybody has, self-responsibility, but the system that you were trained in also has a lot to do with creating that version of you that became the Standard, that became judgmental.
I think that that's kind of what programming can do to us at times, and being so caught up, and I took my responsibility very, very seriously. And not having the right support when you come back from a battle or from a conflict or even from a training exercise that goes awry. There isn't mental health support in the ways that there ought to be. Actually, when I was on my second deployment, when I was in Afghanistan, it was probably the harder of the two deployments because, I already knew like what I was in for to a degree. I had more responsibilities. Again, I found myself a female with 500 plus men and, just all eyes on me. And there were times when I didn't really think that I would make it out, to be honest with you. I've never attempted suicide in my life. I have lived in darkness for sure. And I ordered a yoga mat. And on that yoga mat, I definitely did a lot of abdominal exercises. I did a lot of push-ups, but I also found myself laying on that mat and holding myself and feeling my body. And, I had such intense anxiety to the point where I was afraid to go to sleep at night. I was afraid that, if I fell asleep, that I wasn't going to wake up. I would just lay there and count my breath. I know now, wow, I was actually practicing breath work, at its core. Innately, like we know what to do for ourselves if we just listen.
So what are the procedures and the services that are in place within the Army when it comes to mental health? Because you doing these things and finding your breath alone while on your yoga mat, unbeknownst to you at the time doing yoga, but just walk me through like what actually is available for people.
Well, let's just say, okay, after a regular mission, and by regular mission, I mean just like a patrol, right? We went out and we were just like patrolling the streets regular day, and we got shot at a couple times or nothing would happen. We would just come back. We would do, whatever we needed to do to unload, to reset for the next day. And then that would be it, And
it's up to the individuals to decide what it is that they need to do to reset.
If you have a good team leader, they're in charge of figuring out what they're going to do. But on a regular basis, no, there's not going to be someone checking in on your mental health. But if somebody was to die out on a mission, okay, then of course, like everyone's coming back. Okay, the chaplain's going to come in and, say a couple words or whatever. But it's really, the chaplain's available for you. Here he is. The chaplain will go and say a couple things. The chaplain may go up to a couple of the individuals. But after the chaplain, or maybe even an additional chaplain, comes from another unit, or the behavioral health psychologist, there's one per brigade, and that's roughly like 3,000 soldiers. Now, you can go and talk to these people, but if a soldier is being seen, or a sergeant or something is being seen, going and talking to them all the time, then that's going to alert you, your command team, that there's something going on. If you're seeing, your soldier constantly going and talking, you're going to want to know what's going on, right? And you have that right to go and speak to your soldier, because if they're going out, they're handling a weapon. I would want to know what's going on, right? And we can't blackball, I'm using that language, people for going and getting help for mental health. It happens in the police force, as you know. I mean, it happens in the first responders. We just systemically, as a society, we have a crisis, we have a trauma, and we just don't talk about it. We don't even talk about death. And I think COVID, has even shown us we're so displaced from that as well.
Obviously, this culture, when you're in the service, carries over to the experience of how you ask for help, how you struggle, like what goes on when you come back home. I'm wanting to ask, as a civilian, like, what do service members want civilians to know about that experience returning home? What you need from us, like what you need from your loved ones in that experience?
That's supercharged, that entire question. Yeah. And it is also a question that you ask me, I will give you one answer. And if you ask someone that is just coming out of or off of active duty military, will more than likely say something different. Through the groups that I'm facilitating, the PTSD group, the women's group, the vet talk group, the warrior writers group, the hiking group, the kayaking, the walking group, all these different groups that we have and that I've been involved in. What I've learned is that, our stories are different. The experiences that we have are a little different, but the feelings, the emotions, the physical sensations in our body, it is the same. We feel the fists curl up, our shoulders roll in, the body wanting to just curl, and like our jaw clench, and the headaches and the ringing in the ear, trouble falling asleep, and, the pacing and the worry and feeling alone and the guilt of like whether or not we should have done that, and like wondering what it was all for. So someone that's like gone through a healing process, ask questions, but be prepared to sit, listen, and engage, and don't be nervous to ask questions. But someone that has not really, especially in tune with their body, I probably wouldn't ask too many questions about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's understandable there's just different phases of every healing process, just different types of trauma. It's from a particular place, but that's what this is.
I would have to say that when I got out, I thought I was ready to kind of share my experiences with people. And once I kind of started to, I knew that they weren't listening. So I stopped. That didn't take long at all. I mean, it was like a couple times people didn't listen and I didn't share. And, I didn't even share my experiences really with buddies, from the military. I had that survivor's guilt. I felt shame, I suppose. And I didn't know how to mend that. It took a long time. It took a long time until, like I said, I hit that wall when my body finally broke down and I couldn't hold it in anymore. My PTSD was like at its worst, and I was so angry. I was becoming that monster that I spoke about. That's when I knew that I really needed to start to get help. And I didn't know how to talk about anything. I really didn't feel worthy
of receiving any help,
of talking to anybody about my experiences. Mm-hmm. I tried the VA for a little bit, and that really got me pissed off. I did work at the VA, by the way, for a little under a year, and that actually triggered a lot of my PTSD, because I witnessed, like how much veterans were just a disaster. I was upset with the processes of the behavioral health system when I went in to get care for myself. And it just really pissed me off that I'd have to answer the same questions every time I went back about how many nightmares, how many dreams, how much anger am I having, how many flashbacks. It was just every time I'd have to answer the same questions. And I didn't like it. And so I ran away from it. I avoided it. And I tried private therapy. And what ended up helping me was meditation. I finally found meditation, transcendental meditation. I started running again. That's always been my go-to. Mm-hmm. I found myself like back in nature, hiking, a health coaching training that really transformed just my entire lifestyle. The food I put into my body, the stuff I put on my skin, everything, my relationships, transformed my life. And then I went into plant medicine. I was having a problem with substance use, with alcohol, and like 3 months later, I stopped drinking. I went into AA. And after that, my life just started to really like dramatically change. Mm-hmm. In between all of that, I started telling my story. I started opening up about my military stuff, started sharing a little bit more with people like my mom, with like other friends, but very select people, very select people.
When did Veterans Yoga Project and when did Tribe come into play? Because those two things seem to be a big part of the path as it relates to yoga and the movement part of your healing.
So Tribe was being formed during my 300 hour with the guidance and mentorship of Phoebe Leona of Nomad, Always at Om, and with Amy Gatzemeyer and CC Gibbons as well. And during the 300 hour training, we had Deb Jeanette, who's the president of Veterans Yoga Project, come in. And that was in 2018. And then shortly thereafter, we were VYP teachers. Then I became area manager in New York for the Hudson Valley. And now it's transformed to the Mid-Hudson region for Veterans Yoga Projects. When Amy and I were in the military, not having the tools of yoga, not having the tools of, how to harness our own breath, how to move our bodies in such a way to get this, stress, these sensations out. We're never going to stop trauma. Trauma is going to happen. You don't have to be in the military to have PTS or anxiety or depression or eating disorders. Trauma comes in different pathways. So vicarious trauma, indirect trauma, but we can prevent the triggers of PTS, of anxiety, depression, substance use abuse. That was what I wanted to give back, help prevent, give people these tools that I didn't have. We came up with the name, and, Tribe stands for We Teach Resiliency, Increased Balance, and Endurance.
Oh, I didn't realize it was an acronym. Okay.
Of course, the military, right?
Has to be an acronym.
That's right. It's got to be an acronym. How can we retain the service member? How can we prevent these triggers from happening? And how can we just give the service member and their families, because it's really important. This is not a, singular job or career field. This is a family, it's a lifestyle. In the military, there is a focus on train the trainer. So my dream is to have this train the trainer program. So it's like a 30-hour, yoga teacher training program. So you have these master yogis that then go and train, these sub company level people, these 30-hour, yoga trainings. And then they can go out and they can conduct these yoga sessions. I'd like for that to be, dispersed in every military installation. Tribe has weekend curriculums, 14 hours, it's all accredited by Yoga Alliance. We have yoga teacher trainings. We have a moral injury training that's free. We have other trainings that come up that are hosted by, well-known speakers.
Are you always working with either active duty or veterans?
Tribe does focus on active duty military. However, we do open everything until veterans to scholarships. The primary focus is to active military and active military spouses. And then it goes to veterans and then to veterans, family members. But yes, we've also done trainings for units that are like going into deployments.
That's awesome. And the other thing that I really wanted to hear about, because it was like such a thread throughout this entire conversation of you realizing the importance of peer-to-peer work. And, that started with your club in high school and running the Youth Safe House. Now you are peer specialist in the Vet to Vet program.
One of my main positions here in the center is the peer advocate. I tell you, I am very happy that I am in Veterans Yoga Project's compassion fatigue training.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yes. So check that out. If you don't know anything about it, please check it out. I'm giving a plug to it. I facilitate a lot of peer groups. And one of the cool things that I get to do is just sit back and kind of watch the groups work, that magic. And one of the groups that I have is a PTS group, and people that, the age difference has got to be like sometimes even 40 years. And it's hybrid. So we have people that come in person, and then and I've actually had some of my own soldiers that tune in, which is super cool. I got these guys to do some breathing exercises, journaling, they do that with me. It's pretty amazing. We have guys that have, Parkinson's. They suffer from Alzheimer's that come in, and just the amount of support that another man has for, another man to get up and like walk him to the bathroom because he forgets where the bathroom is. Sitting and listening to, one man talk about how he doesn't understand how he made it through the weekend because he was just in so much grief. We have this open line of communication, so everyone has each other's phone numbers and emails, and it's just unbelievable the trust that is developed inside this space. You can't have that anywhere else. Just because we had that commonality of being in the military, raising our hand and saying that, okay, we are going to serve our country, serve our community. We just believe in something like greater, and we have that respect for one another. You see each other's soul, I suppose.
Yeah, I can imagine it was even like that feeling that you had with your grandfathers. There doesn't even have to be an exchange of words.
Yeah. And it's the belief in the mission of like really serving others that are kind of lost in this space of leaving their tribe and finding their tribe is just unbelievable. It's palpable here. And I really hadn't found it anywhere else since I got out.
We spoke about you intelligently turning to service as a way to alchemize some of the things that was going on in your life and to give of yourself to help other people. But you've been on this journey of figuring out how to do that and keep your cup full, and that whole self-care piece. What practices are in place now? What's your mentality around that caring for the caregiver piece so that you can continue to show up?
Well, my truth, Satya, I did not practice that very well, despite even close people around me, trying hard to say, hey, here's the mirror. Mm-hmm. You're hurting yourself or you're getting hurt. My body kind of screaming out to say, hey, slow down. I look in the mirror every day, and that is something that I didn't do for a long time. I would quite literally keep the light off, putting makeup on. But I look in the mirror every day and, I have my self-massage practices and, have mantras because, I don't always have the best narrative in my head about my body or about what's my work, my personality. And so even if there's a little false motivation, I need to turn the volume up on that. Loving kindness meditation has always been a huge practice for me. Telling my story, sharing my story, letting that out is a part of this. And that's what's healing. And that's what's allowing others to do the same. That's also like the self-forgiveness piece. And that also, I believe, helps like with PTSD, helps with anxiety, depression, the getting out into nature. That is actually my jam. Being where the source is, what better way to really heal? Mm-hmm. It's all right there, and we're all a part of it.
You had mentioned to me, just based on, how life has unfolded and the things that you've had the opportunity to do and been drawn to, that your dharma is as a warrior. And mm-hmm. You've been on this healing path for years now. And I'm curious of how you see yourself as that warrior now. What is your view of what a warrior is and can be?
That's a good question. A warrior does not need to be big and scary, fast and fierce. A warrior can be slow and methodical. And it's been a hard lesson to learn. My body at various times in the last 3 years has shut down in various ways physically. And a warrior knows when to speak and when to let the other lead. A warrior knows when it's time to put down their sword. And I know that I'm not finished serving, and I know that I'll always be serving. It's a much slower process now, and it's a guiding now, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's also coming from a place of wisdom now. Someone had said to me one time, and this was when I was in Iraq, and it was a person that was in a group called the Asymmetrical Warfare Group. And if I was to stay in the military, that was a group that I was going to apply for. But anyhow, they said, I've never seen anybody work as hard as you do. I was a staff sergeant, and I was just all over the place. And usually you have your privates doing those things, I've just always been that doer. But again, it came from that place to not sit and be. And I can now do that. I can now be at peace, be at ease with what comes in my body. And I don't create a story of what it is or hide and shy away from it. I stay, and it's pretty profound for me. And I'm really proud of myself because it's taken me a very long time to get to this place. Yeah.
What is it that brings you hope these days? What is it that keeps you going?
It's just amazing to know that the dream I had and still have, others, have that and believe in it too, and are carrying it on and building into it. And their tribe teachers, and watching, veterans that are struggling and come into the center. And sometimes they scare me with their stories. And I get in the car at the end of the day and I'm just exhausted. And then months later, I see them out the window and they're walking in with one of the other struggling veterans. And they have just come back from meeting and driving one another, an hour and a half to a medical appointment because one of the other ones were too afraid to go. And these are grown men.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know each other 4 months ago. And that that gives me hope. That gives me hope and like healing. That gives me hope and forgiveness on so many different levels. I just believe, see miracles happen every day. If you look, you can see them. But when you're not present, you'll miss them. Every day, they're right there.
Jessica Bugbee, the realest of the real and an honorable warrior in so many ways. I didn't grow up with family in the military or even close friends, so being able to have this candid and transparent conversation with what Jess's experience has been really taught me a lot about what people are going through and the millions of people that serve our country and serve in other branches of the military. It really helped me to understand where they're coming from and what the challenges are. And with any kind of trauma and PTSD, it takes so much courage to step forward and not only ask for help, but persist in your own healing when so many of the structures in place seem to be lacking in resources and efficacy. Hearing from Jess about how many avenues she had to go down before finding meditation, yoga, breathwork, AA, it's a wonder how far she's come in just a few years' time. And thank goodness she and so many others out there are creating these programs. If you'd like to learn more about Jessica's work, you can find her in 3 places: tribeyogamilitary.org, hvcvr.org, and her personal website, jessicabugbee.org. If you enjoyed this episode, you may also like our first ever episode with Dr. Daniel Libby, Executive Director of Veterans Yoga Project and creator of Mindful Resilience for Trauma Recovery and Compassion Fatigue. Simply go to our Dandelion Effect podcast page wherever you listen and scroll all the way down to episode 1. A special thank you to Matthew Marsalik and the Drum Brothers, whose music you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast, as well as Dr. Jean Shinoda-Bolin, who first turned us on to the phenomenon of the Dandelion Effect and how ideas move through the world. This podcast is a production of the Feather Pipe Foundation, a 501c3 dedicated to healing, education, community, and empowerment. If you'd like to help us support this project, please visit featherpipe.com/gratitude and donate. Be sure to tune in to our next episode in 2 weeks. I cannot wait to share another amazing conversation with you. Until then, have a beautiful day.